The desert sun burned low over the Arizona plains, casting long shadows across the sparse, dusty landscape. A lone cowboy rode toward the horizon, his hat pulled low, dust swirling around the worn leather of his boots. His horse moved steadily, hooves stirring sand and grit. He was a man of few words, known in distant towns for quiet strength and fairness. Ahead, a small Apache village appeared, its wooden dwellings nestled near a rocky rise. The cowboy had come seeking work, nothing more. But the moment he entered the outskirts, he felt eyes on him. 3 widows, sitting atop a low ridge, watched him carefully, whispering to each other. Their laughter was sharp, cutting through the still air. "He thinks he can survive here," one said, her voice carrying over the wind. "He won't last a week in our lands," another added. The third tilted her head, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Doesn't he know the desert tests every man?" The cowboy dismounted, leaving his horse tied to a post. His eyes swept the area, not in fear, but in awareness. In the West, silence often spoke louder than any shout. He had learned that pride could get a man killed, and humility could save a life. He began by repairing fences that had been damaged by storms, moving with steady hands and calm focus. The widows snickered from above, tossing insults and teasing him with playful mockery. Yet he never responded with anger or arrogance. He worked quietly, letting his actions speak for him, each movement deliberate, measured, and precise. Children peeked from behind huts, watching the cowboy with wide eyes. Even at this early stage, they sensed that he was different. Unlike most outsiders, he did not trample customs or ignore tradition. He observed boundaries, offered small acts of help, and moved without demanding attention. By midday, the laughter of the widows had begun to falter, not entirely, but enough to betray a hint of uncertainty. For the first time, they wondered if the man they mocked might be more than they imagined. His calm strength, his quiet respect for their space, and the way he endured ridicule without reaction, it was foreign to them, yet oddly compelling. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the plains in shades of gold and crimson, the cowboy paused, wiping sweat from his brow. The widows descended from the ridge, still cautious, still skeptical, yet unable to ignore him entirely. Something unspoken passed between them, a challenge, a test, a silent question about who would endure and who would falter. The desert wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of dust, smoke, and distant sage. In that stillness, it became clear, in this land of survival and grit, respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. And for the first time, the widows wondered if this quiet cowboy might just earn theirs. The next morning, the desert sun rose pale over the village, casting long, thin shadows across the dusty ground. The cowboy awoke before dawn, careful not to disturb the sleeping animals or the quiet homes around him. He had chosen to camp near the corral, his horse tethered close, ears twitching at the faint sounds of the waking village. From a distance, he saw the 3 widows observing him. Their eyes were sharper this morning, scanning, calculating. The teasing from yesterday had turned into something subtler, mockery tempered by curiosity. They weren't used to strangers who ignored ridicule, who worked quietly without complaint. As he moved toward the corral, they approached, still at a distance, their voices light but pointed. "Didn't you feel the desert yesterday?" one asked, eyes narrowing. "It can swallow men whole if they aren't careful." He looked up, meeting her gaze calmly. "I know the desert takes what it will," he said quietly, "but it respects preparation and patience." Another widow snorted. "Words don't save you here." "I don't need words," he replied, adjusting a loose post on the fence. "Actions do." The third widow tilted her head, studying him closely. There was no arrogance in his face. No pretense. Only steady hands and quiet determination. She noticed small things, how he brushed away dust from a beam before nailing it, how he offered water to a child without hesitation, how he avoided trampling sacred ground near the trees. The widows exchanged glances. Their laughter was gone, replaced by something unspoken, the first hint of respect. The cowboy worked from sunrise to midday, repairing fences, organizing feed, and making subtle adjustments to the corral that only a practiced hand would notice. Children peeked through doorways, whispering to each other, fascinated by the man who neither shouted nor rushed, who seemed to move with the rhythm of the land rather than against it. By mid-afternoon, one widow stepped forward, curiosity overcoming skepticism. "Why do you stay silent when we mock you?" she asked. He paused, letting his hammer rest for a moment. "Silence shows more than words," he said. It lets you see who I am, not who you think I am." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dry earth. The widow considered his answer carefully. In this land, where words often led to duels and insults to death, a quiet man who acted with honesty was as rare as rain in the desert. As the sun began to sink, painting the horizon in gold and crimson, the widows stepped back, their laughter fading entirely. They watched the cowboy mount his horse once more, leading it to a shaded water trough. There was something unsettling, and yet magnetic, about the calm authority in his movements. For the first time, the widows realized they might have misjudged him. The man they had mocked was not weak, nor foolish, nor naive. He was steady, resilient, and in a world ruled by survival and cunning, he had earned something they had not expected, their attention. The desert whispered around them, dry and eternal, carrying a subtle truth. Respect could not be demanded, it had to be earned, one action at a time. And the cowboy was earning it with every measured step. By the third day, the widow's teasing had shifted. What had once been loud laughter and sharp words had turned into subtle tests, challenges designed to measure his strength, patience, and character. The cowboy worked quietly, as always. He mended a broken corral gate that had been unstable for weeks, reinforced a water trough against the sun's heat, and even guided a few of the village children through a steep path without complaint. Every action was deliberate, careful, measured. Nothing he did demanded attention, but it could not go unnoticed. The widows observed from a distance, whispering to one another. "He notices things we didn't expect," one admitted, frowning. "He doesn't just survive, he anticipates." Another nodded, though her pride prevented her from saying more. "Perhaps he is not like other men we've seen." That afternoon, one widow dared a bolder challenge. "You claim to understand this land," she said, stepping closer as he repaired a fence post. "If that is true, tell me, how would you guide the herd through the canyon during a storm?" The cowboy looked up, calm. "By keeping them close, moving slowly, respecting the terrain. The strong help the weak, but the weak must also move carefully. Chaos only destroys both." The widow blinked. His answer was simple, but it carried authority. "And if someone disobeys?" she asked. "Then you correct them," he said, glancing at her briefly. "With patience, not punishment." She studied him silently, impressed despite herself. The other two widows watched from above, tension and curiosity mingling in their expressions. The desert wind whipped through the canyon, rustling dry grass and carrying faint dust. It seemed to emphasize the moment, the lesson that action, not words, defined a man. By evening, the widows' laughter had almost vanished. Instead, they observed quietly as he worked, noting small gestures, the way he handed water to a child before taking it himself, how he balanced caution with efficiency, and how he respected the boundaries of their land without question. That night, as the desert sky turned deep indigo, the widows gathered near the edge of the camp. One spoke quietly. "He is steady, even when we push him." "Yes," another said, reluctantly. "And he does not demand respect, he earns it." For the first time, mockery carried no satisfaction. They had expected a man who would be irritated, or prideful, or foolish. Instead, they found someone who was quiet, strong, and fair, a rare combination in a world ruled by survival and cunning. The third widow finally spoke, almost to herself. "Perhaps we have underestimated him." The cowboy, oblivious to the conversation, secured his horse near the corral and stood still for a moment, watching the sun sink below the horizon. The desert glowed orange and crimson, its vast silence echoing a single truth: respect could not be demanded, only earned. And with every small action, every measured choice, the cowboy was earning theirs, one quiet step at a time. By the fourth day, the atmosphere in the village had shifted. The cowboy's steady presence had quieted the whispers and laughter of the widows. No longer mocking, they observed him with a mix of curiosity and unease. They realized he was not just strong or capable, he was patient, disciplined, and respectful in ways few outsiders were. That afternoon, the village leader, an elder with deep-set eyes and a commanding presence, approached the camp. His steps were deliberate, and the widows instinctively fell silent. "You have been observing him," the elder said, voice firm but calm, "and he has observed you. What have you learned?" The widows exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond. Finally, the eldest spoke, her tone defensive but honest. "He is, unlike other men. Quiet, careful, steady. Yet, we cannot say if he belongs here." The elder nodded slowly, as if weighing the desert itself for an answer. Belonging, he said, is not about origin. It is about respect, trust, and the ability to endure alongside us. He has shown these qualities in every action. Now, it is your choice how you respond. One widow bit her lip. We mocked him at first, she admitted. We tested him, and he did not falter. Exactly, the elder replied. A man who does not falter under scrutiny is one who can stand with your people. In our tribe, we value strength, yes, but we value restraint and understanding even more. The widows were silent, each reflecting on their own actions over the past few days. The laughter, the teasing, the challenges, they had been shields, tools to measure him. And yet, the man before them had not only endured, he had gained their attention and, more importantly, their respect. Finally, the elder's voice rose slightly, not in anger but in command. You have tested him enough. He is worthy. If your hearts are ready, he will be welcomed as your husband, not by force but by choice of the tribe. The widows froze. The words hung in the air like heat rising off the desert sand. None of them had expected such a declaration, not the quiet cowboy, not the challenges, not even the elder's wisdom. Their teasing had been a game, a way to protect themselves from loneliness and uncertainty. Now, that game was over. The eldest widow lowered her eyes, her thoughts tangled between fear, curiosity, and a faint spark of admiration. We must consider this, she whispered. The second widow nodded slowly, understanding the weight of tradition and the trust the elder had placed in them. The third remained silent, her gaze fixed on the cowboy, who stood with calm composure, neither imposing nor demanding. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the village. The desert wind carried a faint scent of sage, dust, and change. In that moment, the widows realized that respect could no longer be ignored, and perhaps, neither could their own hearts. For the first time, what had begun as mockery was shifting towards something more profound. The cowboy had proven himself not by words or boastful claims, but by steady action, patience, and quiet integrity. And the desert, vast and unyielding, seemed to approve. The days that followed were quieter, but heavier with meaning. The three widows no longer mocked the cowboy openly. Instead, they watched him from the edge of the village, observing each action, each choice. Every small gesture carried weight. The way he tended to the animals, how he respected the children's games, the care he showed when repairing roofs and fences. It was steady, deliberate, unassuming work, but it spoke louder than any boast. The eldest widow, still wary, approached him first. You do not speak much, she said softly. Yet everything you do, it teaches us more than words ever could. He glanced up, calm, meeting her eyes without arrogance. I do not speak because actions reveal truth faster than words. And trust cannot be demanded, it must be earned. Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. She had expected fire, defiance, perhaps pride, but found none. Only patience, strength, and quiet attention. For the first time, she felt curiosity replacing doubt. Later, the second widow followed a similar path. She challenged him with tasks, carrying water from the river, guiding her horse across rough terrain. Each time, he responded with care and calm authority. She expected irritation or impatience. She found none. Her skepticism began to waver. She noticed something she had not expected in any outsider before: consistency. A man who did not flinch, who did not yield, who did not mock back, someone who stood unwavering even under testing. The third widow remained cautious, watching silently. She observed the small kindnesses, how he offered shade to the children, how he cleaned tools before putting them away, how he did not take credit for what needed doing. She realized slowly that these small acts defined the man far more than grand gestures ever could. By evening, the widows gathered quietly, without mockery. Their conversation, usually filled with teasing, was now reflective. He is different, the eldest admitted. I do not know if I have seen a man like him before. Nor I, said the second. Strong, yet gentle. Commanding, yet humble. The third remained silent, watching the cowboy in the distance, leading a small group of children back to the village. Their admiration was quiet, growing, but undeniable. At dusk, the desert sky burned gold and crimson, reflecting in the eyes of those who had once mocked him. The cowboy sat near the fire, tending it slowly, thoughtfully, as if each flicker mirrored the rhythm of the desert itself. The widows approached, hesitant but steady, drawn by something they could not name. Trust, respect, perhaps even the faint beginnings of affection. For the first time, the game of mockery ended. A deeper connection had begun, one built on observation, patience, and integrity. The cowboy did not demand admiration, nor did he seek it. He simply stood, steady and quiet, showing that in a world of chaos and testing, true strength came not from boasting, but from consistency and care. And the desert, ever watchful, seemed to approve of this slow, careful transformation. The following days were marked by quiet routines, each one shaping the village in subtle ways. The widows no longer watched from a distance. Instead, they worked alongside the cowboy, side by side, testing nothing but learning everything. He moved with steady hands and calm focus, never rushing, never demanding. Every gesture carried intent, teaching more than words ever could. The eldest widow, once the loudest skeptic, found herself laughing genuinely for the first time in months. She followed him to the livestock pens, helping feed and water the animals. He offered advice without ordering, guidance without condescension. She noticed how he treated each creature with care, and each person with respect. There was no pretense, no desire to impress, only quiet consistency. The second widow had started observing his routines more closely. She noticed his small acts, how he cleaned tools before storing them, how he ensured children were safe before starting any task, how he respected sacred spots around the village. She felt a subtle admiration growing in her chest. In a world ruled by survival, strength alone was not enough. One needed wisdom, patience, and the ability to endure without complaint. He had all three. The third widow, still cautious, began to engage more. She asked him to help guide a small group of children along a rocky trail. He agreed, explaining each step clearly, showing how to navigate hazards carefully. She saw the children trust him implicitly, following without fear. And she realized she could, too. Slowly, her skepticism transformed into quiet respect. Evenings were calm. They gathered near the fire, sharing the day's work and observations. Words were few, but meaning ran deep. The cowboy never sought attention, he did not demand admiration. Instead, he allowed them to notice for themselves, letting actions speak where words were unnecessary. In that silence, trust was built, brick by careful brick. One night, under a sky littered with stars, the eldest widow approached him alone. "You have changed the way we see outsiders," she said softly. "Most arrive only to take or boast. You teach without claiming." He looked at her, calm and measured. "I do what is right because it must be done, not for praise or fear. Respect is earned, not given. And trust is chosen." The desert night carried a gentle wind, brushing the camp with the scent of sage and dust. She nodded, finally understanding that the quiet cowboy had not only survived their tests, he had reshaped them. By the week's end, the widows moved freely around him, teasing lightly but now without malice. Their laughter was warm, genuine. The dynamic had shifted entirely. What had started as mockery was now mutual respect, slowly evolving into trust and connection. The desert, vast and silent, seemed to watch, approving the transformation. What had begun as ridicule had grown into understanding. What had begun as distance had blossomed into companionship. And the cowboy, steadfast and patient, had become the center of it all, not by force, not by words, but by quiet, unwavering integrity. Weeks passed, and the quiet routines of the village had become a rhythm shared between the cowboy and the three widows. The air that once carried laughter of mockery now carried something different, curiosity, respect, and the beginnings of trust that ran deeper than any words could convey. The widows, who had once tested him with teasing and challenges, now approached him with small requests and shared work. They asked him to guide children along rugged trails, help repair broken tools, and even teach skills that would make life in the village easier. He never hesitated, never scolded, never claimed credit. His calm presence gave them space to learn, to test themselves, and to grow alongside him. One afternoon, the eldest widow lingered by the river, watching him carefully repair a corral gate. "You have changed our view of what a man can be," she said softly, stepping closer. "We mocked you, thinking you were just another stranger, but you are steady, patient, and fair." He looked up, eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. "I never sought to impress," he replied. "I only sought to act rightly. Strength is not in what we boast, but in how we endure and respect others along the way." The second widow, standing nearby, smiled faintly. "You do not command us, yet we follow your example. That is a kind of leadership we have never seen." He shrugged slightly, humbly. "Leadership is not about power, it is about care. About helping others stand without fear. The third widow, once the most cautious, approached last. She extended her hand, not in mockery this time, but in a quiet gesture of trust. "We have seen your patience, your respect, and your fairness," she said. "We no longer doubt you. We accept you." Her words, simple yet profound, echoed in the stillness of the desert. The wind carried dust across the plain, brushing against the village as if the land itself acknowledged the transformation. That evening, the village elder called the widows forward. "You have tested him, and he has endured," the elder said, his voice steady. "You have seen his character, his patience, and his respect. The decision now rests with you, as your hearts and tradition guide." The widows looked at him, then at one another, considering carefully. Their laughter, once sharp and teasing, had softened into smiles filled with admiration and understanding. The desert sky above reflected their clarity, a vast canvas of orange and gold, quiet and patient, much like the cowboy himself. Finally, the eldest widow spoke for all. "We trust him. We accept him, not because we are commanded, but because he has earned our respect in our hearts." The cowboy bowed his head in acknowledgement. No words were needed beyond this gesture. The desert, the village, and the land itself seemed to exhale, as if approving the quiet bonds now formed. Where once mockery had ruled, trust now stood. Where skepticism had lingered, admiration had grown. And the cowboy, steadfast, patient, and quietly powerful, had earned something far more lasting than survival. He had earned connection, acceptance, and the beginning of partnership. The sun rose slowly over the Arizona plains, casting golden light across the village. The air was quiet, save for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant sound of horses grazing. Today was a day of change, a day the desert seemed to pause for. The widows, once mocking, once skeptical, now stood together, their expressions measured yet bright. The village elder approached, his eyes reflecting both pride and approval. "You have chosen wisely," he said. "This man has proven himself not through words, not through strength alone, but through patience, respect, and consistency. Today, he will join your lives as husband and partner." The cowboy stood quietly, as he always did. No boast, no pretense, no grand display. He bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the decision, honoring the traditions of the tribe, and recognizing the trust placed in him. One by one, the widows approached him. The eldest, with a soft smile, extended her hand first. "We accept you," she said. "Not as a stranger, not as a visitor, but as someone who has earned our respect in our hearts." The second widow followed, her gaze steady. "You have shown us patience, fairness, and quiet strength. We welcome you." The third, still cautious but sincere, stepped forward last. "We trust you. We have seen your character and know you will stand with us. Not above us." That is enough. No words were needed beyond that. The desert, ever vast and silent, seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the union that had grown not from force or obligation, but from mutual respect, patience, and understanding. The village gathered, witnessing not just a ceremony, but a transformation. A cowboy who had once been an outsider was now part of the tribe, not because of dominance or wealth, but because he had lived rightly. The widows, who had once mocked him, now stood beside him with smiles of genuine admiration. Together, they represented the strength of tradition, resilience, and trust. As the day faded into evening, the fire pits were lit, casting warm light across faces filled with quiet joy. Children laughed, playing between the adults. Animals moved freely, untroubled. The land seemed at peace, reflecting the harmony now established in the hearts of those who had once doubted. Later, the cowboy and the widows stood together outside the village, watching the sun set behind the distant hills. No words were spoken, but none were needed. The trust had been earned, the bonds formed, and the desert had witnessed the quiet power of integrity, patience, and respect. The widows smiled at one another and at him, understanding that this life would not always be easy, but it would be shared. Together, they had transformed mockery into laughter, skepticism into admiration, and distance into partnership. In a land ruled by survival and cunning, they had learned that true strength is quiet, enduring, and respectful. And that, above all, trust and integrity could create a life far richer than fear, pride, or domination ever could. The cowboy bowed slightly to the desert, to the village, and to the three women who had once mocked him, and now shared their lives with him. The plains stretched endlessly beyond, promising more challenges, yes, but also a life lived together, with honor, trust, and unity.